You guys know that saying? My grandpa says it to me often. Smell the roses. I am incredibly grateful for where I am right now. So we left off talking about Miss Block coming home and asking if I wanted to take a motorcycle class. To which my response was, yes. I don't know why, like I never really thought about like taking a motorcycle class. Growing up, my parents were very, very against motorcycles. And I think they're still kind of against motorcycles, but they've warmed up to them a little bit more because, you know, it's something that like I've been able to like show them a little bit more about. Everybody has that story of somebody that they know that was involved in something terrible with a motorcycle. And if you guys ride, you all know what I'm talking about. Random people coming up to you telling you, say, my mom's aunt's sister's uncle ended up blah 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 on a motorcycle. Sorry to hear that. So yeah, ended up taking a motorcycle class, started looking around for motorcycles that I might be interested in, heard about the Harley-Davidson Sportster, affordable option from Harley. It was like, cool, yeah, like maybe I'll be able to finance one of those. And so ended up buying a used Iron 883, which is the OG Iron that you guys see today. We're still making content on, like 5 years later. The OG Iron, the U Sportster, 1275, 110, currently 110. We're aiming for 120, setting that goal, that benchmark. So yeah, I ended up getting into motorcycles, and because of where we lived at the time, a block away from Universal Studios in Orlando, because of all those stories that you hear from people, I was worried about, you know, somebody potentially not paying attention in a car and pulling out in front of me, or, you know, rear-ending me, or, you know, some kind of accident happening. And so I had a GoPro at the time, which is funny. I think it was like a GoPro Hero 3. I almost didn't have a GoPro at the time because right before that, I had a friend and him and his wife took a trip and he asked me if he could borrow my GoPro. And so I said, yeah. Well, they ended up going to this, I don't even know, it was like some kind of underwater cave. Whenever they went there, he was filming with the GoPro and he actually ended up dropping it. It sunk to the bottom. He talked to the guide and he was like, man, like we don't really know how deep this thing goes. So that GoPro was gone forever. Now, lucky for me, my friend is a good friend and he ended up buying me a replacement. Even though I told him, I'm like, you don't have to buy me a replacement. I'm like, don't worry about it, it's fine. But he did. He felt bad and he ended up buying me a GoPro Hero 3, which is the first GoPro that I ended up mounting up to a motorcycle helmet. It was either the 3 or the 4. I know I had the 4 on a helmet for sure because, you know, he bought that GoPro and I was riding and I wanted to basically record. I was like, you know, that's a great use for a GoPro. And look at me, still riding around with a GoPro on my motorcycle helmet. Luckily for me, he bought a replacement, mounted it up to the helmet, was just riding like to and from work, you know, around town and such. I think the second day that I had the Iron 883, I took it on the highway just because, you know, I thought that's what you were supposed to do. Little did I know, like, that the Iron 883 doesn't handle the highway so well. And I was just like, I guess this is just what riding a motorcycle on the highway is like. Boy, was I in for a world of learning. And so, like I said, I was feeling creatively unfulfilled at my job. And so what I discovered by mounting my GoPro onto my helmet, I ended up actually doing like a YouTube search how to mount a GoPro onto a motorcycle helmet. And whenever I searched that is whenever I came across moto vlogging. And I was like, you know, that's kind of cool. Like, people ride around and they basically just run a microphone to the inside of the helmet. While they're riding, they talk about whatever thoughts they're wanting to talk about, saying stuff out loud instead of just saying it in your head. And that's when I decided to make a moto vlog. And my first moto vlog went over, is moto vlogging weird? And the reason that I thought it was weird was because you're talking to yourself. You're talking to yourself at the time of the recording, but as soon as you edit the video and you put it out for the world to basically see and interact with, you're no longer talking to yourself, you're talking to a community. It was weird at first. That first ride that I did, actually the first moto vlog I did, that was the first time I ever took my motorcycle, or the first time that I was ever on a motorcycle on the highway. And I went to my buddy's house. It's funny because I probably seem all like composed and, you know, whatever, but man, I was hanging on for dear life first time you ever go like highway speeds on a motorcycle, you feel like you're going Mach 3, breaking the sound barrier. That's when I discovered motovlogging, and I started basically like playing around within Adobe Premiere, and I was like, you know, this is super cool. I can run a mic, I can talk, go over like a subject, a theme, and I know how to edit, and so I can like trim out the parts that aren't as interesting, you know, and kind of try to keep on the storyline. And at that time, man, like I was still pretty new to editing, you know, I'd only taken like one class about it, and you know, they teach you the basics enough to get by, and you know, at the time it was enough to get by, but little did I know I had much more to learn about editing styles. I wasn't the best at speaking either. There was a lot of downtime, like my thoughts weren't as composed and together as they are now. There was definitely a lot of, and those gaps in between the thought processes. The more you speak, the more that you're able to kind of like line up these thought processes in your head and like tell a story. And that's exactly what these videos are. It's telling you guys a story. Like I just said at the very beginning, buckle up, enjoy the view, telling you this story of how I ended up quitting my job. If you guys are getting impatient, just wait for it. We're getting there. I'm telling you, all of this kind of comes together and it adds up in the end. So I start recording my rides and I start motovlogging. I start talking about, you know, random stuff, whatever it is. I remember like one of those first few videos, I was talking about having trouble with having cats and setting up a Christmas tree because the damn cats like would not leave the Christmas tree alone, and set it up with ornaments and lights and all that stuff, and then come home and the tree would be knocked over and ornaments would be everywhere. Made a video talking about like my first biker wave. And then because I had the Iron 883, previously I was actually into modifying cars. I had a car that I modified and made videos on, and this was like before YouTube days, which is crazy and like dating myself probably, but finding places to host videos was a huge pain in the ass. And so I would host them on like servers and stuff that friends had. I would do kind of like write-ups on forums of like how to do stuff to cars. That always seemed to do really well, you know. It was like kind of my way of having like that creative fulfillment, but also giving back to a community. It's funny, like talking to my family nowadays, it's like they say like, dude, you were always meant to do this YouTube thing because you've been doing it forever. They note, you know, back whenever I got my first car, whenever I was still in high school, and how I would tinker on it and basically like bought jack stands and a jack, and I bought tools, and I basically started just like modifying it, making it my own. My dad would come in the garage and he'd ask me, how do you know how to do this? And I'm like, I'll just shrug, and I'm like, it's nuts and bolts, man. You know, you take it apart, you put it back together. It's a tinkerer. I started motovlogging, and then in my downtime, and then like on the weekends and stuff, the time that I had off, in the time that I wasn't working, I started editing motovlogs and putting them out. And so, you know, sometimes like, you know, work would be a little more crazy and I wouldn't be able to put as much towards it. Sometimes, you know, work would be a little less crazy and I'd have a lot of downtime and I'd be able to like put more towards it. And it just kind of became something that like I really enjoyed. And then I started working on my Iron, and I started looking up videos on like how to do stuff to my Iron, and the videos that were out there were garbage, man. Like the camera angles were terrible. They would talk about like a very important part, and they would be holding the camera facing what it was that you needed to be watching, and then as they worked on the part, they would like angle the camera like this way all of a sudden. You just skipped like a really important part. And so I saw that and I was like, you know what, I can do better than that. And so that's what I did. I started making videos on the stuff that I was doing anyways to my Harley-Davidson Sportster, you know, my Iron 883. And the community found that incredibly helpful. I think the first video that I did, like a how-to, was how to install passenger pegs. And I did that because, you know, Miss Block, she didn't pass the MSF course at the time, and I still wanted her to be able to ride. And I installed those passenger pegs, which was a huge pain of getting through that back bracket for the exhaust that I had installed. She rode with me one time on the back, and that was the first and last time that she rode with me because she hated it, which I thought was kind of funny. A lot of work of installing those damn pegs for one ride. And so yeah, I just kept on working my normal 9-to-5 job, and I kept on making videos. Thought long and hard about what I would name the channel, and I remember laying in bed and telling her like, I think I'm gonna start a YouTube channel. And so I did. And the reason that I kept on it is because I had found and discovered motorcycles. They were a lot of fun, fell in love with it. I was also able to combine it with my passion of doing something creative, video editing and creating videos, and then also getting that fulfillment of making how-to videos and giving back to the community. That's one of those like recurring threads throughout the Blockhead channel, throughout the brand, is I've always, since the very beginning, always tried to give back to the community somehow, you know. So like my how to ride videos, you know, that's helped a lot of people. It's like brought a lot to the community. The modification videos have given people the confidence to venture on their own bikes, learn and understand like how to install things or how engines work, you know, whatever it may be. That's always been like a huge goal of mine, like since before I started the channel, which is kind of crazy to think, doing these write-ups on forums and whatnot. I basically ended up staying at that job that I had for probably about a little over 2 years, I think. Awesome job. I loved the people. Awesome job in the beginning, I should say. As I ended up staying there longer and longer, I kept on getting put up for promotion. All of my managers were like, hey, we hired him at a junior level, but he does senior level work. We can basically leave him with the rest of the team and he can manage a team. He deserves to be promoted to senior level. Oh man, that's beautiful. They said that, you know, I deserve to be promoted to senior level or, you know, be a creative director, which is a manager, or an art director. I was actually designer developer. So you've got junior, regular, senior, art director, creative director, and then like VP of design. So yeah, my managers basically kept on going to the higher ups and saying like, hey, he deserves a promotion, he does good work, we can basically take time off and hand him the reins. We never hear from him, he doesn't contact us, the ship is never like on fire, you know, he's able to manage the team and stuff goes off, you know, just fine without a hitch, which was cool, man. It's like, once again, you know, having that validation from people that like have been in this industry for a long time, and you know, I'm new to it, but I'm getting like this respect from people that was just awesome, and it felt very fulfilling. It's a recurring theme here of fulfilling, right? F***ing A, this is beautiful. So we're gonna pull over, we're gonna take a break here, guys, and I will continue where I end up quitting that job and going to my next job, Black Hills National Forest. Loving it. Let's see where like my legs are. It's the dirt. All right, guys, we are leaving the little lookout place. Meow. Beautiful scenery here, loving it. All right, where were we? My first job out of college. Yeah, worked there for a couple years, was recommended for promotion. They led me on for a really long time. I was making okay money. I think I actually took a pay cut leaving the service industry and like working with Disney. And then in between there, I actually worked at a gun range, became a licensed firearms instructor and all that good stuff, which many of you guys know. If you've watched the how to ride videos, I basically talk about not being a motorcycle instructor, but I do have instructor experience with being a firearms instructor. Oh, and actually in between there, I worked in Alaska too. Went up to Alaska, worked on a train just cause, heard it was really good money, so went up there, worked for a season. It was awesome money. The reason it was awesome money is because you worked 90 to 100 hour weeks, and the time that you had off you basically spent sleeping or doing laundry. Like, you really had no time to do anything else besides work, and whenever you're working that much, you can't spend your money. So it's like, yeah, it was great money. It saved a lot, which was great for moving back to Orlando and going to school and all that. But 90 to 100 hour weeks, that's brutal. Pretty sure I clocked over 100 hours one week even. See, I was at this company for a while. They kept on promising me like promotions, recommending me for promotions, like talking me up, like saying I was doing a great job, but nothing ever happens. And I actually had this other company that it was considered a startup. It was a software company, and they were looking for a designer. They didn't have anybody in-house, so they kept on having to go like to an external agency to do their designs, and the external agency just, like, the communication between them was like very difficult, and they kept on missing the mark, which, you know, believe me, I totally understand with hiring, you know, contracting designers, like I said, and that other little side hustle. Funnily enough, years and years before, whenever I had moved to Florida and I moved to Orlando, and like I said, I had a bunch of roommates, and you know, we had parties and, you know, the whole college experience. One of the roommates who I was really great friends with, who actually went to high school with as well, was the president of this new company. They were basically going into the software industry. He had hit me up like a year before, and he was asking me if I knew of any designers that were looking for work. And I was like most of the ones that I do know like have jobs, but I'll see if anybody's, you know, possibly looking to change. And he's like, cool. You know, I put some feelers out there, I didn't get anything back. And then he hits me up like a year later, and he's like, hey man, like, we're still looking for a designer. I'm like, dude, it's been a long time, you know? And he's like, yeah, we're still working with this agency. He's like, we're getting really tired of working with them. It's costing us a lot of money. Like, we really want a designer in-house. Do you know anybody? And I was like, man, honestly, like, no, everybody that I know, you know, has a job, like a really, you know, good 9-to-5, benefits and all that stuff. And so he was like, well, we're willing to pay this. And I was like, oh, really? And so whenever he said that number, I was like, well, that's much better than I'm doing. And so I was like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, if you guys are paying that, like, I'd be interested. And so I basically ended up, you know, getting invited by the company to go check out their operations. So I went out there, you know, checked it all out, and I was like, yeah, you know, I do design plus development. And so they're like, okay, cool, like, you know, we could definitely use like a refresh and like continuation of design on our webpage. And so I'm like, yep, I can do that, no problem. And so I put in my resignation to this this first company that I worked for. But whenever I put in my resignation, that was whenever the VP of the company ended up reaching out to me personally, and he was like, hey, I do not accept your letter of resignation. I never knew, like, a company could not accept your letter of resignation. Like, I didn't really think of them coming back to me like that. And he was like, you know, your managers speak very well about you. He's like, I actually have you pulled up on my computer right now, and you've been up for promotion. He's like, you know, we've had a couple of uneasy, you know, past few weeks, but what can we do to keep you? You know, we really don't want to lose you. You guys know how I talked about not being very good at math, right? So I'm sitting here thinking of like, okay, this is my salary for company A. I want to go to company B. Company B, the salary that they promised was over double what my previous salary was. And so I basically told the VP, I was like, yeah, like, I would have approached you guys about being competitive with this other company that has basically offered me a position and like sent me an offer letter, and, you know, we signed and all that stuff. But I don't think it's something that would be possible for y'all to be competitive. And he was like, well, give me a number. How much of a raise would we need to give you to be competitive? And I said, well, I'm not very good at math, but 100%. And he's like, okay, so 100% raise? And I said, yeah. He's like, so double your salary. I said, actually over double my salary. And he was like, yeah, unfortunately we can't do that. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't think so. That's why I didn't ask. And we were just kind of laughing about it. You know, it wasn't like I wasn't being insulting or anything. It was just kind of like I didn't ask because it was unrealistic for that company. And that's one of those things you learn, like, as you know, get into like professional industries, is usually like the first company that you get into, you're always going to make more money by, you know, quitting and going to a different company, which kind of sucks because then you know, you lose like your work family and all that. And it was sad, you know, like I definitely like didn't want to leave like my work family there. We had a really awesome dynamic, you know, I was really good friends, you know, we always went out, you know, dinners and having drinks and spending weekends together and all that stuff. And, you know, some of us still remain friends, but yeah, it just changed the whole thing, you know. So I start going to work at this other company, and one of the stipulations of going to work for this, you know, company B, I'll just call it company B from now on. So one of the stipulations of working with company B is that I was able to work remote up to 3 days a week. Now, the reason that was one of the stipulations is because this company, their headquarters was an hour-and-a-half drive away from where I lived, and I had just bought a house, and so it was just kind of like, you know, you can't sell a house that you just bought within like a year or two, because usually it's like you need some time to, you know, build some equity and get away from the fees and closing costs and all that stuff. So I didn't want to sell the house, right? And so it was like, okay, so 3 days a week I'll be remote. You guys can basically have me in office 2 days a week. You guys choose what 2 days you want. And so they would basically fluctuate. For a little while there, I was actually only going in 1 day a week because they only needed me 1 day, because all of the work that I could do was, you know, able to be done remote. Coding, I don't need to be in their building to code, you know, and I could start earlier, you know, because I didn't have to drive an hour and a half, and I could end later because I didn't have to drive an hour and a half back. So we're talking 3 hours of driving per day of me working in the office, right? That's an important fact to remember for later. So I started basically working there, and it was awesome, you know, hitting the ground running, picking up projects, learning their workflow. They did lack a bit of structure. Me coming from a very large, you know, agency that worked on like with very large, you know, like I said, corporate Fortune 500 companies, and then going to this like startup style place, it was a little more difficult because they didn't have the structure. But what that did allow me was the freedom to be able to create. They didn't have a designer in-house, and so they pretty much had like a logo done, and they had kind of a look and feel, but they didn't have anything refined. And so I was basically able to come onto this company, design it from the ground up. I'm talking like everything, like an entire style guide, you know, fonts, font weights, font colors, company colors, logo usage. Like I redesigned a logo. I actually designed a couple different logos because they ended up starting a few like branch off companies. Did a lot of design, did a lot of web development, and I was with them for, I don't even know, probably about a year. And then they started kind of getting into some other things that they were needing done for design. And so my manager basically approached me and said, hey, we need to create a packaging design for this product that we're making. Is that something that you're able to do? Through my design sequence back in college, I said, yeah, you know, I know how to do packaging design. You know, I know how to use Illustrator, and, you know, design standards and concepts are pretty much the same across the board. So yeah, I can totally do that. So I got linked up with their printer, got the specs and all that stuff that I needed, implemented the style guides that I had made, and, you know, designed up this product packaging design. It came out awesome. Keep in mind, all this is happening while I'm still riding motorcycles and I'm doing YouTube. So it's my hobby, right? And so, like, in addition to working a full-time job, I'm also still doing YouTube, and I'm doing two videos a week at minimum for the most part. And this is probably, like I said, 2 to 3 years later. I'm continuing with YouTube, and one of the things that I had mentioned very early on with YouTube is that I wanted to keep my personal life and my hobbies separate from my professional career. And that's the whole reason I've, you know, not done a face reveal. Despite many of you all saying that there's no way that my job didn't know about my YouTube channel, my job did not know about my YouTube channel. They still don't. And I don't work for them anymore. And they never knew about it. I never told any of them. Yeah, so they just never knew about it. A lot of you guys think it's hard to keep things separated like that, but all you have to do is just go into work and not talk about it. And so that's exactly what I did. One of them in that entire company rode motorcycles, and he would talk about road glides and stuff like that. You know, he was into baggers. I wasn't really making any bagger content at the time. Nobody there ever came across my channel. I never talked about it to them. I never promoted it. You know, none of that stuff. So they never knew about it. So yeah, like I'm still doing the whole YouTube thing while, you know, doing the 9 to 5, working. I'm doing web design, web development, and then I start doing product, you know, and packaging design for this company. And they're like, oh, cool, you know, like, good job. They don't know that I can film, edit, record videos. They don't know that I have experience in, like, audio engineering. They don't know that I have any other experience in any other creative, you know, sense besides design and web development. And so they asked me basically if I can do this product, you know, packaging design, and I can do it, and I did it, and it came out looking really nice, and they were very happy with it. And so then we basically had these meetings. Not everybody in the company was able to attend the meetings, and so what they wanted to start doing was they wanted to start filming the meetings and then hosting them up on, you know, the servers, putting like an intro on them, putting an outro on them, all that stuff, and for it to look just very professional. And so they were like, are you able to do these videos, like film these meetings and, like, you know, edit them and post them? And I was like, yeah, I can do that. I know how to edit. Well, like I said, little did they know I knew how to edit very well. So I started filming these meetings, you know, once a week. Came up with like an intro logo reveal thing that looked all very professional. Came up with an outro, set up a whole template to like do these videos like once a week. Came up with like a audio layer, like under track, you know, it was just like a very professional little meeting video. So then what ended up happening, they started wanting to record podcasts, and they were like, hey, do you know how to record podcasts? And I said, yes, I know how to do that. This is the equipment that we'll need, and we'll basically need like kind of a dedicated room in order to do it, because, you know, it's like you got to have control of the environment and the sound and all that. And so they ended up buying all the equipment, and they ended up starting to take this room that they had that was just, you know, almost like storage. It's a really, really big room. And so what they ended up doing is they, you know, cleaned all that out. They had like contractors come in. They did acoustic treatment to the room. They put up like little dividing panels that were like acoustic panels as well. Bought a table, bought mics, bought a mixing board, all that stuff, bought software, and we started recording podcasts. After the podcast, this is over the course of months, after the podcast, they wanted to start doing videos on like insights into the industry, and they were like, do you know how to, you know, like shoot these videos? Is this something you'd be able to do? And then edit them kind of like you're doing the edits for the meetings. And I was like, yeah, that's something that I could do, but I'm gonna need better equipment. This is the equipment that I'm gonna need. And so by the time it was done, I was one person, but I was doing the job of an entire creative agency, which was awesome, you know, like once again, very fulfilling, and it was challenging. There was always something new, you know, it wasn't the same old, which I loved. But it did start to become overwhelming. My manager wasn't the best manager of people and wasn't the best in terms of scheduling. Everything was due as soon as possible. Every project was priority. And like once you start experiencing that stress and you start getting like kind of yelled at for like these projects not getting turned in on time because you've got, you know, 6 projects happening all at one time and they're all due right now, like it just doesn't work like that, especially if you're one person. And so that like sense of creative fulfillment started turning into something else. I'm getting yelled at, like I feel like I'm in trouble, you know, I'm not like living up to my manager's expectations. And so I started feeling kind of like I was failing, you know, even though I wasn't failing. I was doing like a really, you know, good job for the company, and I was helping them grow a lot. I knew I was an asset to the team, but I wasn't being made to feel like an asset to the team. All right, guys, we are stopping for lunch here. I think it's called Hill City or something. So I will continue after we grab some lunch. Continuing where my job is starting to basically overload and take advantage of me. Crazy how these things progress. Look at that. All them damn motor cackles. Woo! Love it. Lunchtime. Oh yeah, block my windshield.